is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound? This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber.
Okay, members, can I welcome you all? We start the meeting in open session. Can I advise members of the need to maintain social distancing during the meeting and provide a brief overview of the day's business? Today, the committee will consider subordinate legislation, briefing from Logistics UK, update on issues facing the freight and haulage sector, hydrogen NI, the potential clean hydrogen offers to Northern Ireland's economy and decarbonisation goals, and committee legacy report, Committee for Infrastructure Legacy Report 2017 to 2022. Members, some will be coming and going during the meeting. I know our member Roy Beggs will have to take the chair for today's business, so I'm going to change round a bit of this. We're going to go straight to the briefing from Logistics UK, updates on issues facing the haulage and freight sector. Probably particularly want to hear from them now and give them an opportunity when members are in the room, given the fact of the huge challenges that they are now facing, even in relation to developments with Ukraine. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the committee clerks to please bring those representatives in. Members can find this at their table papers, page 12 and indeed page 20. And what we'll do is we'll hear the briefing, and I'll go first to Roy, and Andrea then come to you because you have to get away, and then the rest of us can carry out our business.
Go to climate. John's got cold.
Good morning. I'm sorry we're pulling you in earlier than anticipated.
That's fine.
We have a couple of committee members that will be coming and going, so we thought it was beneficial for you guys, given the issues that's facing the sector, to have an opportunity to get questions from a further field of members.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. The members understand we're going straight to the briefing from Logistics UK on issues facing the freight and haulage sector. Can I begin, just as committee chair, by welcoming Nick Mcculloch, Fiona Derry and Seamus Linehy from their representative organisation. Seamus from the Policy Manager for Northern Ireland Logistics UK, Ms Fiona Derry, Director, Derry Refrigerated Transport, and Mr Nick Mcculloch, Managing Director for Manfreight. Can I thank you very much for coming up to the committee this morning, and can I begin by placing on record my thanks for the efforts of the industry, particularly as we face a very difficult time in relation to the humanitarian crisis developing in Ukraine and Russia. I know particularly Manfreight and indeed other haulage companies in my own area have been very active, yes, Derry's included as well, been very active in their approach to try and help to supply the Ukrainian refugees and those neighbouring countries with supplies that can help them in a very difficult time. So that doesn't go unnoted. I know the difficulties that your industry faces, despite everything else that's going on in the world, but it really does show that you've stepped up to the plate to try and help those that are less fortunate. So I just want to put that on record. The committee certainly appreciates the efforts of the industry. So without further ado, I would ask whoever it is that's going to give the briefing to begin with, and we'll then follow by questions from members, starting with those members that have to leave quick.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. If I just briefly introduce myself, Seamus Linehy, Policy Manager at Logistics UK, and we represent 18,000 businesses involved in all areas of logistics across the UK, and I'll just let our two members introduce themselves and their operations.
Nick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Nick Mcculloch. I'm a Managing Director at Manfreight Limited. We are a large transport and logistics company, primarily focused on refrigerated products to and from Ireland and Europe.
Good morning, thank you for having us. I'm a director with Dairy Group Ireland. We would focus on the movement of mixed product throughout the island of Ireland, both chilled and frozen product. Again, we are refrigerated, and we would work for all food producers throughout Northern Ireland and Ireland, and we would distribute product to all wholesalers, CDCs, stores, supermarkets throughout the island of Ireland.
Okay. That's very thankful. So whoever wants to lead off, your briefing has been supplied, but if anybody wants to kick off on that, or we can go straight to questions.
Chair, what I'll do, I'll just give a very brief summary of policy paper we submitted to the committee. But yeah, I think we're delighted to be joined by two great ambassadors of the industry here through Manfreight and Dairy Refrigerated Transport today. Very briefly, Chair and committee members, some of the key areas that are affecting the industry at the moment. The first one really is around the labour shortages. There's a shortage really in the UK. There's been a decrease of about 44,000 HGV drivers across the UK. In Northern Ireland, we estimate there's a shortage of around between maybe 1,500 and 2,500 drivers that we could use in the industry. We will go into some detail later on, and the members will detail about what's been done to try and address that. What we have done as well, locally in Northern Ireland, we have worked Logistics UK. We're involved in a task and finish group with the Department for Economy on the all-age apprenticeship scheme. HGV driving was included in that as an initiative, but as yet, really, there's been no agreement really on the new apprentice schemes for Northern Ireland. It would be something really welcome for Northern Ireland, and especially as two local councils have initiated their own HGV driving academies as well. At the moment, really, drivers, the problems really we face at the moment, it's an ageing workforce. The average age of a HGV driver is 51 years of age. And drivers under the age of 35 account for just 17% of drivers. So there is a struggle of getting younger drivers, and was really welcome a while ago the committee to address one of the barriers to employing younger drivers, which is insurance. I know one of the committee members, you questioned members of the insurance industry later, and our members can obviously go into further detail about that as well. One thing basically maybe that the Department for Infrastructure could do to ease the pressure and improve the flow of getting new drivers would be a change to the primary legislation around the use of delegated driving examiners. So at present in Northern Ireland, emergency services such as Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Services, they have the authority to train and then carry out the driving test of new drivers. Now, that is applicable in Great Britain as well. So a large logistics business can train new candidates and then put them through test, and that company is audited by the authorities. Now, I've spoken to the DVA about this. It's not something that they would oppose, but obviously it requires a change to primary legislation. So hopefully through when the committee comes back after the next elections, it's something maybe that we could look about maybe changing that legislation to enable companies to do that themselves. A couple of other things really we're talking about, I did put in there about the development of electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. In our industry, the change, heavy vehicles really at the moment aren't really suited, anything above 26 tonne isn't suited for electric, but vans, many of you'll know, you'll see more and more electric vans now on the roads. I know there's initiatives with the department about improving the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, and we would just ask that our industry is involved in that because it needs to fit. I think the early adopters and the users of electric vehicles will be the parcel sector, utility sector, and cleansing, etc. Going on some of the other things as well, capacity, so pressure on shipping from Great Britain to Northern Ireland at the moment. Belfast Port last year seen an increase in 12% of ro-ro freight. Container traffic was up 15%. But where we're seeing the pressures, it is on a capacity versus availability. So when you do speak to the ports or the ferry companies, they will say, and rightly so, when you look at the average shipping volumes, that there is no problem with capacity on getting goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. What I would stress is that you've got to hone in on availability. You can get a lorry on a boat on an afternoon sailing, but trying to get space on a ferry leaving Liverpool tonight, coming into Belfast for 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, is a problem for a lot of freight operators, and I'll let the members come into that in due course. So, and that's showing that Liverpool is actually up volumes into Belfast, up 16.5% year on year. And a lot of that has got to do with Brexit. because a lot of goods are avoiding leaving Holyhead to Dublin. So when freight arrives into Dublin from Holyhead, that freight is treated as third country imports. So there's quite a lot of administration hurdles and checks. So a lot of that Holyhead traffic has just migrated north to Liverpool and coming in then into Northern Ireland. And that was historically a lot of Northern Irish bound freight that used Holyhead, because Holyhead Dublin was the quickest route to market, especially the south of England. And now those Northern Ireland operators have migrated north, and that's just putting pressure and strain on our supply chain. And again, I think that would be something really good. I think Nick would be able to elaborate more on that as well. And just very briefly, there's a couple of other things there. There is a review out, an inconsiderate parking review the department has out at the moment, a consultation about the ban on parking on pavements. Logistics UK, we've responded to that. We welcome that. We do agree that pavements should be free. There should be no obstacles to vulnerable road users, for pedestrians, people on wheelchairs, prams, etc. We would say that the same has been brought in Scotland and GB. We would like to align with that, where in some cases that vehicles are allowed to load or unload on a pavement in designated areas because there is a lack of availability for HGV or van parking, and that we would ask as well that the time limits are looked at. There is a proposal, a time limit of 20 minutes to load or unload, and again in our submission to the department on that, we feel putting a time limit on that could cause health and safety issues or operational issues, because it means maybe drivers rushing, doing a job, trying to get goods into a bar, restaurant, shop, etc. But we welcome that consultation, but we do just look for it to consider the needs of parcel and goods deliveries. And then nearly at the end here, road safety strategy. The Northern Ireland Road Safety Strategy was out for consultation with the department recently as well. We agreed with a lot of that. We did look about targeted enforcement, the use of an operator compliance risk score system for Northern Ireland. We would welcome that, because that's a system that rewards compliant operators like the guys here in front of you today and targets the non-compliant operators. And then the last point of view is the use of rebated fuel, diesel. Many of you will be aware that the use of red diesel will be no longer permitted from the 1st of April. We responded to the Treasury consultation in September 2020. We outlined our concerns about that, the strain it will cause on many transport operators, the construction sector, etc., and utility sector. What that means is going to have a huge impact on costs, operational costs for businesses here, and again, I'll let the members go into that. So, really, at the moment, fuel, we've got the red diesel at the end of, and these guys will use it for refrigeration units, but overall, fuel prices, again, it's a real strain on the haulage sector. We've seen since a barrel of crude oil has risen 24% since the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Since the start of the year, the rate increase in the barrel of oil has been 56%. Now, I would stress there is no shortage of fuel in forecourts here. What we are seeing, there is some cases where people are going to garages and there's a lack of diesel, for example. That's simply because people are starting to a little bit of panic buying. They're maybe putting more into the tank because they see the prices increasing almost on a daily level. That's simply just a supply chain issue, getting enough out from the terminals, but I would stress that there's enough fuel in the supply chain to keep everyone and all operators there, and we would just ask that people that there is no panic or things like that, people remain calm and sensible. But Chair, that's enough for me for now, so I'm happy to open up Q&A.
Okay, do you want any additional comments before we go to members, Nick and Fiona? Is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, not for me. That was well covered.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so, yeah.
You happy enough? Okay, we're going to go first to Roy Beggs, please, because he has to leave to go to the Speaker's chair.
You've highlighted ongoing labour shortages, but you've indicated that you're working with local government in particular, and I'm aware of some local authorities are sponsoring, using their ratepayers' money to improve the situation, recognise the importance it is to their region. What additional assistance is being given by stormont departments to ensure that we have the necessary number of HGV drivers that are needed?
The only support that we've received so far has been from ABC Council in terms of funding that has been provided, that has allowed for, the initial number was 45 drivers, that's been increased by another 40, so we really welcome that, because that really allows us to bring people into the sector.
This is a major problem. I think we need to take it up with different departments on that issue.
But I suppose if you put that into, that is, as much as that is positive, 85 across the broad context of the requirement and the necessity in Northern Ireland, those 85 people, when they pass their test, will go straight into employment, either between Fiona's company and my company and many others. So as much as it's welcomed, I think there could be a lot more done to bring more drivers into the sector. Our business, our average age is 54. So it'll not be too long before we have a swathe of drivers retiring. And you have to remember, this is a physical job. It is driving, but also you're unloading, offloading, and up to 20, 30 ton payload. So it's important that we try and bring more people into the sector, because there is plenty of employment opportunities.
I've noticed in the briefing document that there's 44,000 fewer drivers than in 2019. And it is also an elderly or an older workforce, so this is a major issue that does need to be addressed. In terms of custom declarations, for all parcels over £135, which is still floating about in the background, what are the implications in terms of extra administrative costs and your ability to handle that?
Well, as we work on the island of Ireland, there's no impact in regards to customs. So certainly Nick would know.
I mean, in terms of the parcel exemption, I can't touch on that because we don't get involved. What I can say is that the additional customs costs for bringing products to Northern Ireland has added people into our business and significant cost. It's a cost that we have to pass on to our customer, and then ultimately that cost will go to the end consumer. So, we bring in excess of 500 trailers a week into Northern Ireland, and for each one there is a customs process that we have to follow, and involves particular costs.
And then finally, just in terms of the consultation on parking on footpaths, it is vital that footpaths remain free for the public to use. But if your lorries were not able to pull up on a footpath, what would be the effect of supplying food and other products to shops? How would it happen?
It's going to be very difficult, because you're pulling up local shops. It's the infrastructure, it's the roads that we have. We obviously are on a very tight limit in regard to loading just-in-time deliveries, chilled frozen products, but at the end of the day we're delivering to very small facilities. So therefore, if there is going to be an embargo going forward, it was something that we would have to study. We'd have to study time-wise how we would handle it, and if there were restrictions in regard to maybe going to certain parts of London or into Dublin at certain times. And again, what we would ask for is notice if we did have to time deliveries. At the moment, we have a lot of restrictions in regard to even our food deliveries, so it would quite bluntly make life very difficult for us to deliver.
I think, in terms of drivers, all our drivers are trained to the highest standards, and particularly the new vehicles that we buy have cameras, blind spot warnings, cameras reversing. So the technology is there, but as you can imagine, when we turn up to city centre locations, it can be quite restrictive. And can be quite dangerous when there's pedestrian movement. So it's important about getting that solution so we can deliver the products to the high street.
And could even just draw back to the point just in regards to drivers, and also even in regard to the parking on curbs. I think it's extremely important that we really do get it out to the public, the benefit of the haulage industry and what exactly we are doing. Like, we need to have a voice out there where we want drivers to come in. We want, people in their 20s and 30s to go into this business. The issue of, going onto curbs, again, we need to get the message out to the public that there is a role here, there's a supply chain here, we're delivering food, and it's a necessity. And to get that communication out to people that, that we need drivers into the industry needs to keep moving. Without vehicles on the road, we're not going to get the basic necessities into the shops, and it's really just to have that voice to encourage people to go in. When we say that even local councils are extremely thankful for the support that the councils are giving us and training drivers, and it's a fantastic start, but we also have to be minded that when we take in new drivers, we are restricted in regards to insurance, particularly in regards to young drivers between the ages of 21 and 24. And again, it's the haulier that's taken on that risk. And I do, like in referring to what Seamus said in regard to the in-house training, I think a greater value could be put on in-house training, because we're under pressure from our insurer to make sure that our drivers are trained, because obviously the more health and safety and the more training that's done in-house, the more of a benefit it is to our company, and then we can go back to our insurer. And I know even our insurers come in and done courses with our trainer driver, and it is something that could be rolled out at a national level, yeah, because it has been done by the insurers, and that we could get some kind of accreditation, again, that we could try and train drivers and try and bolster the industry, and that's really what we want to do.
Okay, thank you. Right, have enough. Andrew?
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking me early for the stuff in the chamber. Thanks for coming along. I think it's really important. I think the issues I want to talk upon was, in the first page of your briefing was around the apprenticeship scheme, and there was a plan for that to be delivered by the end of 2021 by the Department for Economy. So I know from meeting local logistics company within my own constituency the acute pressure it is on labour shortages and getting people into the industry, and also then obviously costs associated with that in terms of salaries and stuff like that. So having a bit of an understanding why do you understand there's been a delay in terms of that apprenticeship scheme, because we're very keen to get that off the ground.
Yeah, if I come in there first, Andrew. Yeah, I was working with the Department for Economy on this. Construction and hospitality were also involved. So it was going to be an all-age apprenticeship. First of all, we had to ensure that an all-age apprenticeship wouldn't discriminate against younger people. It wouldn't mean that they were didn't have the opportunity. And we were able to prove, obviously, and I think we've outlined how young people are not necessarily entering that job in the levels we'd like to. So open it up to people of any age. We understand basically that work began last May, and we were meeting monthly, and it was due to be signed off probably about late September last year, with the scheme planned to begin implementation December of last year. Things subsequently stalled and didn't move any forward. I think maybe there might have been issues maybe around the costs potentially involved and what the numbers would be capped at as well. So unfortunately there's been no conclusion on that, which is really unsatisfactory, especially when we have the likes of Belfast City Council, ABC and Mid and East Antrim Borough Council initiating their own driver academies. I think it would be really good to see the executive and through the DFE deliver that.
Yeah. I think maybe we could write to the department and ask.
I think that's certainly something we'll follow up on.
I think that would be useful. The other one, just in relation to the current costs pressures in terms of fuel and shipping costs. So I'm very aware of the pressures using industry faced during the pandemic, when there was a real drop-off of trade as a result of that, and there was real financial pressures around that, and borrowings taken out and all the rest of it. And now we're in the situation now with increasing fuel prices, and also I'm quite conscious within the briefing also in relation to international shipping prices. Now, this is particularly acute because you work in a very low margin industry and a very competitive industry, and just have be interested to know your views at what challenges is this going to provide. Is it going to really push a lot of operators under a lot of pressure in terms of viability, or are you going to see this just reflecting itself through in terms of cost prices and stuff like that? Because I understand that your industry is absolutely crucial to the function of the economy, but these pressures are, I haven't seen them before in my lifetime.
I'd even go as far as to say I think the crisis that's coming before is that we're going to have more pressure than we even had with Brexit. Even the hauliers, we were at the front of Brexit. We were at the front of COVID. And now we're in the very front of the fuel crisis that's about to hit us. I just took some interesting numbers last night just in regard to the rebated diesel and the white diesel. Just very quickly, this time last year, red diesel was 48.25 and white diesel was 88p. Yesterday evening, the red diesel was 108p. And the white diesel was 141, and I didn't even check the figures this morning. So therefore, there's a 30% difference in rebated diesel and white diesel. And all our refrigerated vehicles run on red diesel. So therefore, come next month, if this is implemented, our costs are going to go up by 30% immediately. And also, just to give you an idea of fridges, a chilled product would burn 3 litres per hour. If you're carrying a frozen product, it's 5 litres per hour. And then as the summer hits, because you need to keep the freezer high to keep the food frozen and chilled, it's going to burn an awful lot more. So I would come here today to ask to put a stay on the rebated diesel for next month. We are in an existential crisis at the moment, and I do think it's important that anything that we can control at the moment, that we should, because at the end of the day, we're going to have this 30% increase, bottom line, next month. So therefore,
Just for the chamber, hold on.
The Deputy Speaker will take the chair in 5 minutes. The Deputy Speaker will take the chair in 5 minutes.
So
There you win.
Go now.
You win this chamber and have your say there.
So I just think it's important that anything that we can control at the moment, because there's going to be a trickle effect. It's manufacturers, it's our local food producers. They're trying to run generators even on red diesel at the moment because they're trying to reduce the energy costs and the electricity that's out there. And the red diesel, I don't know whether it's the reason behind it is environmental, whether it's environmentally friendly or trying to introduce the white diesel. But we're just been hit between the two eyes. If there was an environmentally friendly alternative, we want it. We're researching it. I'm sure your company are, Nick, as well. There are other alternatives, but they're not there for us at the moment.
And it's passing it on to the consumer as well at present,
that's what we're going to have to
already
do.
a cost of living crisis.
Like, if you're wondering why your basket in 2 or 3 weeks' time has gone up, there's no need to wonder, because I'm telling you the reason why.
We can see that. Yeah.
I would back
On the cold face.
what Fiona says in terms of the suspension. I mean, more and more cost is coming our way. I mean, for us in terms of long distance driving, white diesel, will now that will accrue 40% of our running costs on every journey. And if you think about it, most of our retail customers, we have to go back and ask for that. And large companies, the reaction time from asking for a request and an increase to actually getting a sign off can take quite considerable time. So at that point, we are losing money. You're right; it's a low margin industry, and thankfully we're big enough operators where we can live with some of the pain. But if you touch on some of the smaller companies who are living day by day, week by week, those companies will that will mean parking up trucks. We've already heard that, where an operator of maybe 10, 15 trucks simply has to park up 5 trucks. And has to be slid. Because the other side of that too is there's a risk if companies are not making money when we send our invoice in and they're having financial struggles, they will delay that payment to the very last minute because they're waiting on someone else paying. So it's a snowball effect.
Yeah, because they're all going back. They're going back to the companies. They're going back to the supermarkets. The food producers, as you know, locally, like Ireland or Northern Ireland, is one of the opportunities that have been there in recent months. We have seen our local producers really step up to the mark, and it's the local producers and the hauliers and the service industry that are supporting them. It's these costs that we could put a stay on that is really going to assist us, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight these issues. I know the Chancellor's got a spring statement later on this month when there's real opportunity and need for action in relation to this. And I'm just very conscious a lot of these businesses are family run. A lot of people have put their whole livelihoods and their whole lives into this, and it's important that we support them going forward, because they're employing people, but they're also a key part of our community as well.
I think so.
No, and look, I suppose a very salient point, and I actually think it's very timely that you're before the committee today, because ultimately your sector is a very public-facing sector, and I think actually the COVID pandemic brought that really to light. And now when we're facing it, I have to say, and I think we're facing a perfect storm here, because we have rising the cost of living, rising fuel costs, end of rebate on red diesel, rising shipping costs, Russian war on Ukraine, additional bureaucracy and costs associated with trading arrangements here now via whether it's Northern Ireland Protocol or not. Whatever people's positions are, there's additional costs to the industry. And all of this rolled into one, it is a serious challenge for the industry to face. And I do fully agree with what you're saying, Fiona. If it is a case that the end of the rebate on red diesel is for environmental reasons, well, if there's an alternative there, so be it. But if there's not, in times of crisis, we can't afford another knock on the industry that's going to have massive add additional cost to the consumer ultimately. So I have considerable sympathy, and I would imagine other members do around the committee table. You did supply a costs paper, so I suppose probably thinking of where things are going daily, whether it's at the fuel pumps or indeed even in the cost of living. How, even the cost paper that's been submitted, is it out of date already, given where we are with Ukraine? Do you want to maybe elaborate a wee bit on that, so obviously people are listening in?
Yeah, as what I've touched on is that, we also have to remember that transport isn't just about drivers or warehouses and about warehouse colleagues. We have a complete backroom staff, marketing, finance, legal, over 450 employees who all have to be paid. And, the prices are changing daily. And for us, we ultimately have to guesstimate where costs are going and then go back to our customers. Some customers are great and understand and will pay. Many customers will argue, even though it's so obvious what the problem is. So for us, we're spending time where we should be focusing on our business and delivering for our customers, where in the background probably what we're doing is fighting with customers, fighting with people that are chasing invoices, whatever that may, because the cost, Minister, is just changing day by day, and it's difficult to keep up with, and we can only see it going one way, and then all that does is put fear into the market. We know in certain manufacturers, between labour shortages and cost increases, production is going down, when in fact production on the island of Ireland and Northern Ireland, given our agri-food sector, should be going up. We should be exporting a lot more, and it's simply a challenge because there's many challenges within that is inhibiting that.
I would fear, even for our local producers, that they're going to see what they can produce going forward, even those extra costs that are there in regard to the fuel and red diesel and all the other energy costs that are there. They're going to go to the supermarkets. I think it's going to be very interesting to actually see what has been purchased. All you have to do is think about in regard to this industry, and it's a very simple principle. If you reduce what's going into your basket, then your local producer is reducing what they're producing. And all of us here are going to find that we don't have as much spare money to buy a luxury or buy those extra produce. We're all going to start watching what's going into our trolleys, and that's impacting on local producers. And it's just a very simple point, but that's where you just see the change in the environment here. And as Nick has put it very well there, all those extra costs are putting pressure on every business out there, and we are the body out there that is transporting all the goods that are manufactured and produced in Northern Ireland.
And I'm particularly thinking about refrigerated transport here and the impact on the red diesel, the removal of red diesel rebate. Do you want to just pin down exactly what that means to the industry at this time?
We run our fridges on red diesel. So therefore, our costs are going up 30% come next month. That has to be passed on one way or the other. We have absolutely no issue in alternative energy, but in my own opinion, the cart is before the horse here. We have till 2030, 2050, which is a number of years down the road. We as a company are a size where we are looking at alternatives. For instance, it's hydrogenated vegetable oil. I was looking this up, as an alternative energy, but it's outside our remit. It's too expensive. But we need the time to study these alternative energies. We need the time, and the investment needs to be put in at government level. Where are we going to have the plug-in systems to travel the country on the ships going to mainland UK? Because this storm that's in front of us and this existential cost that's been put in front of us next month, it's not going to resolve the problem long term. It's just going to have a negative impact on producers and on industry and large in Northern Ireland, and we haven't resolved the greater issue here, which is what is going to be the alternative in the next 30 years.
The other concern I would have is around with the fuel price increasing, fuel theft. So if you'd imagine our trucks in the tractor unit alone can have 1,000 litres, and if we put 500 litres in, which was red, into the fridge, our drivers are parked up on laybys, doing their day's job, having a rest safely. I mean, we've already seen over the last probably 2 years a significant increase in white diesel theft on laybys. I mean, I just see that another risk coming our way, particularly if it goes. Even now, if it goes above £2 a litre, then we are just putting our drivers at even further risk on the roadside.
Well, I think it's the absolute height of madness for the government to even suggest that they're going to continue with this move to remove the rebate in red diesel, because you've given us clearly the evidence as to how it impacts upon the consumer and your own business, particularly in the refrigerated aspect. But let's look at the suppliers as well. So let's look at the agricultural sector in particular.
Yes.
Those again are in the wider context are sectors that are already facing again rising costs. To then add this into the mix at the moment, I think it's totally inappropriate, and it's certainly something that I hope the committee will take an opinion on following their meeting with you. In relation to the labour shortages, and I know this has been a particular point, and I know the work that's been going on in the industry to try and bring in younger drivers, to try and bring in more female drivers as well, which is very welcoming, and I think the fact that some councils have stepped up to the plate is welcoming. But again, I want to know what the department are doing to support the industry in this crisis of labour that did exist post-Brexit and indeed moving forward, because we know where the age range is and we know that the significant pressure that's coming down the line. So with that, obviously the department ask that you've mentioned, which was delegated driver examiners, when that conversation is put to the department, are we getting a blanket kickback on that, and even in-house training? And the other thing to bear in mind as well, and I have had this raised by hauliers, and I think it is something that should be taken into account. So obviously with COVID regulations, I understand that your colleagues in England, Scotland and I think Wales, there was a driver hour flexibility which helped them through a very difficult time, and as we've mentioned, it's probably going to be more difficult now in the foreseeable. Has the department give any indication of a move in similar light here in Northern Ireland?
Chair, if I just come in first, I suppose to answer your first question, just going back slightly, you asked about the fuel costs. The prices out last week are now out of date. Forecourt prices are up 3.4%. Since last week, but that's dwarfed actually with air freight and passenger freight on aircraft. In 1 week, the fuel used for jets has gone up 28%. So there will be a knock-on effect whether people are simply travelling for leisure or with air freight as well. Going back to what the DVA are doing with regards to in the department with helping with the driver shortage. They've been very receptive, to be honest. There was more driving examiners recruited. Some driving examiners who were only qualified to test for people testing in cars, for example, were trained up, skilled up to then do HGV driving. And then subsequently the backfill, there was new examiners. So that helped with that. But I think Nick and Fiona could maybe talk about their experiences with putting drivers through that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, you're right, we are already inhibited in terms of the travel time coming from an island per se, Northern Ireland. So when we get into mainland GB, we want to maximise our driving hours, and our hours driving is less than what it can be for a UK, Welsh and Scottish driver. So again, we're inhibited. And many of our customers in the agri-food are sending products as far down as London and right down to the south coast. So at a certain point, our driver will have to stop, take his legal break. And again, that means product from Northern Ireland, again, is arriving later than the mainland GB products.
What's the difference at the moment?
I can't remember the exact number, but if I remember off the top of my head, it's around 6 hours of a difference in driving in the week, which will make a difference because our driver, from a legality perspective, starts his card when he leaves Northern Ireland. Again, we've tried to be adaptive and work and have drivers starting from the ports, but again, that's just an added pressure and an added cost. The base trucks in ports, base drivers in different locations to try and adapt to the change.
You want anything to add to that?
No, I completely agree with that, and I think we have to put it on the record, safety is first, because at the end of the day, there are employees and their safety on the road, and I think that point has to be made. But in regard to travel from NI to mainland GB, that would be more Nick's side of things. We are on the island of Ireland. But in regard to labour shortages in general, again, I just make the point that we absolutely need to introduce, and we need to put the word out there for the industry and get people into the industry, because it's just all a perfect storm for the industry at the moment. If we have an average age of 54 of someone on the road, and then we have older drivers who have to get medical certs and all the costs that are included with that. And I'd also make the point in regard to actually even training as a driver. Very thankful to ABC Council for introducing a scheme locally, and hopefully that will be rolled out at a national level, because there's a cost of a couple of grand. What is it, 2,000 to 3,000 for a driver trainer? If you were to go out and pay that in your 20s, like that's the same as your 1 or 2 years in university before you even get on the road. And then they're coming to the likes of ourselves if they're in their early 20s, and we have to look at the risk side. So there's so many obstacles to overcome before we can get on the road and have a well qualified driver. But thankfully for our own company, we do have an in-house driver. Again, that's our in-house trainer. Again, that's an extra cost to us. But how do all companies throughout Northern Ireland function on that basis? We do it. We had to justify that cost to our own financial controller, and that all takes time. So I think we really do, for the industry, we have to start thinking outside the box. How can we get people on the road as safely as possible? If we are giving certain stipulations, at least we can start from somewhere. What can we do to assist at national level? We will certainly do that, but at the moment there isn't enough been done, and anything that we can do, we're absolutely open to suggestion or any support that we can have. But we can't constantly absorb the risk that's involved in bringing in the drivers, because our insurance is going to go sky high, and like so many things, it's been monopolised, and we're going to get a certain figure every year, so we have to be very careful about what drivers we bring in. So then it's very difficult for drivers to try and get out there and get on the road first of all. So there's a lot to be considered here.
And also on the horizon then will be equipment shortages. I mean, sourcing new trucks and new trailers, we're fortunate enough that we ordered in advance, but at the moment, probably just like the car market, to go out and source a new tractor unit or a trailer, I mean, the lead time would probably be on average 3 months in normal times. It's now 2 years. There's manufacturers sitting with trucks on the production line waiting on parts because the shortage of certain parts, microchips, is not available. So, and that has an environmental impact, because we should naturally see the profile of tractors and trailers coming down in line with environmental targets. However, what we're seeing is that companies now have to hold on to their tractors and trailers because they can't source new ones. The infrastructure isn't there for biogas, electric, so it's just another challenge that has to be added to the ongoing issues.
And also as well that our suppliers that are providing those vehicles, they haven't got the resources now to see what they can implement or what they can provide to us, because the last 2 or 3 years have been so challenging for all businesses, including ourselves, that the time and effort we should be putting into now looking for those environmental alternatives has now been taken up with Brexit, COVID, and now we have another crisis. And, it's going to take time to try and figure out how we're going to get to that more environmentally alternative here. But at the moment, that infrastructure just isn't in Northern Ireland. So it's very difficult for us to try and keep up when we don't have the alternative available.
And interestingly, our next briefing session is with hydrogen and and looking at the exciting potential that there is. But again,
here we can't get to Dublin and have a plug-in.
It's not there.
No, and I think we've been exploring biogas as well, and we're probably close to a point where we could place an order for trucks. Now, the outlay on the truck is higher than a standard truck, but then it's on the return on investment on fuel, and we do see options, but again, we will be limited to what we can do. We'll have to keep that truck in Northern Ireland doing local deliveries, which is where it shouldn't be. It should be on the distance lorries, where we should be able to go to Cork in your position, go to Scotland, go to wherever, and then be able to refill. And that's where the future is. But again, we don't want to sound so negative, please take that, but because we are a solution-driven industry,
Absolutely.
But at the moment we're firefighting, if we want to call it that, rather than future planning.
And I think your evidence today is evident of that. We understand that the industry want to move in a way which is more environmental and sustainable in the long term, but we have to deal with the here and now.
Yes.
And unless those alternatives are in place, we can't expect an industry that's already facing huge costs to face that burden, because ultimately it will be the consumer.
Yes.
So thanks for that. And final question from me, and maybe more towards Seamus. Obviously now, given the current climate with the Russian war with Ukraine, has the industry projected or forecast what a potential long-term war, a prolonged war in Europe actually means for the industry in terms of costs going forward?
Chair, probably at the moment there's no exact forecast yet because it's still early days, but there will be pressures. There is enough, as I said earlier, there's enough fuel in the system, but I think what we're facing at the moment is more of a shock to the system. Consumers are going out and filling their tanks up in desperation or panic. Probably where we're looking at supply chains, around about 40% of the iron ore that we use in the UK for manufacturing comes from the Ukraine, and that would ship out of Mariupol, which is now under Russian control. So we're going to have to basically resource half of the iron ore that we use for manufacturing here, and we have a heavy manufacturing industry here in Northern Ireland, relies on iron and steel. So that's going to be a problem for us. That's more cost increases because we're going to have to be alternative sources. And the longer this goes on, I suppose it's lack of stability in the market. There's a shock in the system, and that may well impact longer term on fuel prices as well and availability. Russia is not one of our largest suppliers of fuels, of oil, thankfully. Probably talking maybe around about 8 to 10% of the UK reserves, but it's just the longer term rate. It's the unknown yet.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'll now go to questions from other members. So I'll go first to Cathal Boylan, please.
Thank you, Chair, and you're all very welcome.
Thank you.
I want to pick up at some point. I mean, a 6-hour delay, you'd go a long way in 6 hours, Nick. You know what I mean? We talk about the island of Ireland, it's only 300 mile long by 150 mile wide. So, I mean, you got to put it in perspective in terms of the challenges. But I just want to pick up on probably maybe Seamus announced this. I mean, the extra inflationary costs in general, besides the fuel, the challenges you're facing. Obviously, you talk about iron ore there, but what are the other extra inflationary costs right across the industry? I mean, from trucks to drivers to the whole lot. You know what I mean? The ancillary.
We're probably looking. When you're looking at drivers, last year we were probably looking at increases of salaries nationally around about 21%. So that's a big shock to the system, and companies, employers can't absorb that type of increase as well. You're also looking at HGV mechanics and technicians. They're up big figures. Last month alone, their wages increased probably about 1.5%. So it's constant pressures, and because we have a driver shortage, it's a driver's market at the moment. So we're in a situation where drivers are leaving employers multiply throughout a year because they're in demand, so they can call the shots with regards to going to new employers. So it's becoming difficult. Employers are introducing ways to retain drivers through a healthy work-life balance, pay, bonuses, etc. Nick outlined the difficulty in getting new equipment. It used to be where you would reward drivers, give them a nice new lorry as loyalty and things, but because the strain of getting lorries is about a year waiting list, maybe Nick, if you can contact me, but it's about a year to wait for a new lorry from point of order. So that would be the main things really at the moment is labour and fuel.
I think for us in normal market times, we normally go to our customers once a year. So normally January, start of the year, we go and give a percentage of overall increase. And if you go back as far as Brexit, probably 4 or 5 times a year, we were speaking to customers about rate increases. And already this year, we've already been to customers twice. And again, I think almost what will put ourselves into a position where we'll have to go for monthly reviews, and if other costs increase, we need to pass that on. So it's a difficult one to give a percentage. We want to pay our drivers. We want to pay them for what they do. They're away for our drivers can be away for 1 to 2 weeks away from home. So we want to put them in the best of trucks. We want to give them, comfortable living and good salary. So that's the most important thing for us. It's about retaining your drivers now, because if there's a shortage, drivers will move around to go for the better increase. So it's about retaining, because a lot of training, a lot of time and effort goes into it. So it's about keeping them. And for us, you know, we're just constantly. The other side of that is that we're constantly receiving increases from our suppliers, so our tyre suppliers, our vehicle suppliers, or whatever that may be, windscreen suppliers. We're constantly seeing increases, probably on a monthly basis, of letters coming in asking for rate increases. So it's a difficult market to be in. We're doing our best. Service to customers is priority as always, because we don't want empty shelves. So it's just an ongoing challenge.
And we do see that. I mean, the chairs mentioned. I mean, especially the diesel issues can be a major problem.
Absolutely, and it's on its face. You know that's what
You
we're
know what I
looking
mean?
at.
Because you not only have the delivery service, the support service, all of those services, the knock on, the ancillary. The point is, we see that. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of how we can help, but where you go forward from here. You know what I mean? Because it's a major challenge for you. I do agree the ABC tried. Like it was oversubscribed when the course. 400
applicants for 40 jobs.
I mean, like we tried. I know we were asked about it.
Yes.
It was a good scheme.
Yeah.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
and maybe it could be replicated. I mean, maybe Chair will have a chat about how we can influence that. But it certainly it was a good initiative. But
I think it's two things that we've touched on. The first is can we get a delay on the red diesel? It's just another thing that could tip many companies over the edge, and it's even the time just to do the actual changeover. It's not just a simple process. And then two, when we talk about drivers and apprenticeships, that's what we need. We are an industry, as I said, we're not just about drivers and warehouse staff. We have a complete background of many skilled people needed: finance, legal, marketing, engineering, whatever that may be. And we can employ people tomorrow. We're not sitting here, and not to discredit any other industry, we are sitting here today that if we had apprenticeships, and we're quite happy to support, develop those apprenticeships and put meaningful time and effort into them, is that we are, need to employ. You'll always see recruitment opportunities, employment opportunities in Manfred, I'm sure with Derry. So we're an industry that if we didn't have so many challenges, and I know we'll get over them as we've always done, Brexit, COVID, that we can bring a lot of people, which will help the economy and our industry for sure.
I think the overarching point I think we have to realise here is that it's rippling throughout Northern Ireland. When the diesel is hitting, we can tell you immediately what our cost is going to be, but the difficulty for every industry, manufacturer, your small producer that is on a very tight budget supplying supermarkets, they're going off in our fridges tonight. They're going to be delivered tomorrow. So we know now what that extra cost is going to be. We are in constant contact with our customers, and they're in constant contact with their suppliers. There's a major challenge throughout every industry in Northern Ireland at the moment, and we need to find a way in order to manage it. And it's very difficult, and I completely accept it's very difficult to manage those costs at the moment. But at the end of the day, any deal that any company is making at the moment, it's very difficult to try and lock in those prices, because whether you're manufacturing a fridge, whether you're supplying a tyre, all their costs are going up. So we know, like, if we get a knock on the door saying, the cost of that fridge is going up, or the cost of those tyres are going up, we know that our contract is out of date for our tyre manufacturer in a number of months, and we're wondering what's going to come down the line. And as a lot of those, even tyre companies, they're leaving the contracted market. There's only a certain number of suppliers that are going to stay within the contracted market. And again, it's demand, and everyone is doing that. It happened during COVID, where there was only a certain amount on the shelves, where they say, right, what's your key market? What can we focus in? Because at the end of the day, it's going to be about profit. So the more profit that any industry or any company, it's simple economics, any more profit that can be made, or any investments that we can make, we're going to make them. And if we can bring those drivers in and drive that industry, then we can reduce our costs. But there's a heavy cost, there's a heavy burden coming on us very, very quickly, and everyone's trying to find a way to try and manage it. and it's even hitting the smaller industries within Northern Ireland. And it's something that has to be looking at. And as I said again, anything that we can manage at the moment to get over this crisis, we need to do, because we do want to have that further investment in drivers, hold on to drivers. And there's also the greater question is, how do we improve the standard for a driver? Drivers are at the forefront of every crisis in the last number of years, where they were COVID, Brexit. There's extra demands on drivers. Going to mainland UK, there's going to be delays at the port and then extra paperwork and extra training and extra time. They're all extra costs that we have within our companies in regard to training, because we're trying to bring down our extra costs for insurance and damages and managing drivers and managing expectations and managing customer expectations. So there is a wider picture here, but I think always again the industry is at the eye of the storm, and what is hitting us is what ripples down within a number of weeks or months.
And just final question, Chair, and maybe it's for Seamus. I'll double it up because we have responsibility not only to support yourselves but protect the consumer as well. The CPC issue arising from Brexit, has it been resolved, the north-south issue, in terms, and also the fuel duty issue? Seamus, have you been any conversations? I know you travel back and forward. Yeah. Because a cut in the fuel duty would certainly be a supportive. Yeah, the fuel duty, fuel duty is the first one. So UK, we have the second highest rate of fuel duty in Europe. Well, obviously the news yesterday, the Irish government are cutting fuel duty. Now I don't know the exact percentage yet, but that's an advantage the haulage business across the border will have against Nick and Fiona, that their fuel costs will reduce overnight. So that's one thing. And I think that coupled with the red diesel rebate, if the executive can do one thing, it's make representation, even along with the other devolved administrations, to the Treasury about how this is just an untimely increase. Fuel duties remain frozen now for about 9 years. Whether government Treasury will reduce that, we don't know yet, but it's within their power to do that, and now is the time. And probably with the transport manager CPC, so that's a formal qualification. So if you want to be a named transport manager for a haulage business, you must have that. Unfortunately, mutual recognition of qualifications cross-border, it's not there at the moment. So let's say, for example, if you have a haulage business in Belfast and then you have an operating centre in Dublin, which many businesses here have, if you were named as the transport manager at your Dublin depot, legally you cannot hold that anymore because your transport manager qualification is not recognised by the EU. Now, we've been pressing, I've been engaged with the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs and the EU to try and get that looked at and addressed, because it's adding more cost, it's more hassle for people. So again, that's something I know this cuts right across many sectors, whether you're an accountant, a dentist or a transport manager. It's that mutual recognition of qualifications, and that has to be negotiated between the EU and the UK, but there is scope where there could be a bilateral deal, even north-south, where whether you're an electrician or a transport manager, where your qualifications are recognised on either side of the border, and that'd be welcome. John, we'll have a discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, and go now to Liz Kimmins, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you to you all. I'll not go over what others have said. I suppose just a small point on the labour shortages issue, and I know we've talked about this in the past as well. And you said there in I suppose the discussion that you would be keen for as much support as possible, and we give the example of ABC Council. I suppose I'm thinking more along the lines of the Department for Economy and being the lead department in the Assembly for apprenticeships. So I was wondering, is there anything explicitly that they could be doing in your view that would try and help with the issues around labour shortages?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, obviously, it's signing up to the apprenticeships and giving us funding, because I'll stress again, we're not just about drivers and about warehouse operatives. We have many functions, and many, people see the industry as maybe not so glamorous, but because of the scale of the business, we see ourselves as a Formula One team, and the people behind that, there's many different skill sets and many people that we can employ. So for us, it's about defining the apprenticeships and giving people that opportunity, because we see a lot of people maybe not wanting to go to university as their first choice. And if they can come into the industry at an early stage and develop themselves a career within the industry, then we really do welcome that.
Yeah, well, I suppose then in relation to date, has there been much movement in terms of the department regarding that type of support?
If I come in there just first, it all comes down to that all-age apprenticeship scheme. Historically, apprenticeships here, you have to be under 25. That's not really suitable for a driving, because those people aged under 25, really a lot of them aren't becoming drivers or wishing to at that age in their life. But also from the insurance perspectives, the cost, the overhead of employing younger drivers, we want to see, and I think where the demand is, it's people, whether they're 35 or 45, deciding, I quite fancy driving as a career now. I've had enough of whatever. So it's that all-age apprenticeship. What the Department for Economy can do is look at that, address it, give us a scope, how many, set a criteria, how many maximum apprenticeships budget for it in the year, if that is the concern. I think that may be the concern, but it's about getting that addressed as quickly as possible.
I think the take up, and what you touched on was the take up on the recent ABC initiative. So 40 positions and over 400 applications. Surely that's testament enough to say where we can bring people into the industry.
And I'd also make the point again where there's the opportunity in-house now where companies such as ourselves have brought in trainers and we have that extra cost in-house regardless, and we're doing that for our insurance initially, and that's where, but we can see the benefits within the company in recent years where they can bring out drivers and training them. So if we did have a defined criteria where we were answerable to the Department of Economy and what we were achieving, we've absolutely no difficulty in doing that because it's something that we have invested in to date regardless.
Yep.
And finally, if I just say as well, these are roles we need to fill locally. Since really last year, HGV driving is classed as a level 2 skill by Home Office. If you want to have a visa, if you're from the EU, you need to have a minimum level 3 skill as your job here. So lorry drivers do not qualify, and historically a lot of hauliers here would have employed European drivers. We don't have that pool anymore to draw drivers from.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. Just my second question, my final question really, I know you talked earlier, I think it was around, Roy Beggs had raised it, around the customs checks. And it was just to see, in terms of when the Agriculture Minister staff checks, was there an impact on the industry? And just to give an assessment on the protocol as it stands right now from the perspective of hauliers, are there any issues still with the Trader Support Scheme, for example?
I know that was hard to audit, but
I think I mean at the start, it was a very challenging time because of all the new processes and procedures that we had to follow, and it did drive cost and people into our business. We need customs agents, we need people to be able to follow that process correctly, to be able to bring products into Northern Ireland. The position that we're in now is that, like I said earlier, we work in logistics, we find solutions, and we follow the process. It is more time consuming. We see technology being the solution. So, the challenge has been there with the protocol, but it has got a lot easier in recent times.
Okay, and because I know we're pushed for time, could I ask all members, please, that are participating online to please mute? We're getting a lot of feedback into the chamber here. So George, Padraig, Liz, could we all please mute? I think that's it fixed now. Okay, so we're going to go to the next question here, which is from Padraig Delargy.
Chair, can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can from the chamber, yes.
Yeah, sorry, the sound on the chamber isn't great, but I hope you can pick me up okay. So I suppose just a couple of questions. One of the points that had been indicated previously was issues in terms of getting timely driver and vehicle testing, and this is a broader issue. I've dealt with it a lot within my own constituency as well, but could you give an update on how you're faring with this at the moment?
Yeah,
Well, we discussed it just before we came in, and we both agreed that it's all up to date. I checked it out yesterday with Fleet before I came in, anticipating this question, and we are up to date at our end, and I understand you're the same, Nick.
we're in the same position.
Yeah.
So I think,
Brilliant.
and that's where we appreciate during lockdown there was challenges around social distancing, and there was exemptions given, which we gladly took on board. But now we're in a position where we are getting throughput, and it gets our vehicles on the road much quicker and keeps them legal, which we're in support of.
Okay, members, we're still getting a lot of feedback from members that are participating online. Could I just ask again, please, to mute whenever you're not speaking?
Whoever's talking's not listening to you either. So.
Don't know where that's feeding back.
I think George on that.
I suppose just the second question then was around, obviously during the pandemic, we were really appreciative of the work done by hauliers, particularly in keeping supermarkets and shops stocked with essential items. I wonder from that, have there been any lasting impacts from the pandemic that the industry are dealing with and will be dealing with in the future? During this time as well, obviously you were dealing with Brexit, but a general picture, I suppose, on how the last couple of years have impacted the industry as a whole.
I think for the logistics industry, speaking as a general, we have certainly become to the forefront and certainly been seen as a key player in putting products on shelves and delivering for the public and customers. So I think that's key, and it's great to be recognised within the industry, and thank you very much for recognising that. I think for our business, like many other businesses, we had to adapt, we had to redo how we do things, and that's been also positive as well. But for sure, it has been challenging. We bring in solutions. That's what we're here to do, and so for us, long lasting, it's good to see the recognition is there for the industry, because I think if you take a step back, not many people really appreciate how did their food get on the shelves and where it came from, whereas I think a lot of people are much more appreciative of that today.
I think first and foremost, I think we were delighted that all our staff got out of the pandemic. Our drivers were at the very forefront of the pandemic. We said at the very start, this time 2 years ago when it hit it, we said there's no business if the wheels can't get on the road, and it's the drivers that were on the road who needed the cleaning, the hand sanitizer, and we were very much at the forefront of that. So we're very relieved. I suppose the greatest negative has been that it hasn't given us the time to look at further investment and how we can develop the industry, and that's throughout every company and industry throughout Northern Ireland. And that's something we want to move on from. But in regards to COVID and Brexit, we have to the positives we have to look at is the opportunities that have been given to us also and to our local producers, that we got the goods on the shelves, but the goods were got from our local producers when shelves were empty and the products had to be filled. Those product substitutes were found in Northern Ireland, and I think that's a major positive that was found here, and something that has to grow going forward and be protected, and we need to invest in that side of things and appreciate what we created here in Northern Ireland in the last number of years, which was greatly positive.
Very briefly as well, just from myself, I think the legacy that COVID has had on our industry as well. I spoke to one large parcel operator. Their parcel volumes into Northern Ireland are up 24%. There's a lot more e-commerce online, and what the legacy is going to be in our town and city centres here in Northern Ireland, it's urban access for those vans. Everyone will see it now. You'll see those electric vans, I'll not name them, from various distributors. They're delivering everywhere. The problem we're seeing now come to light is that we're granting planning permission to apartment buildings. You might have several hundred people living in one high-rise apartment building, but maybe no loading bays designated for the building. So then you have parcel courier vans double parking on footpaths, cycle lanes, etc., etc. I think it's paramount for the department, when you're considering planning permissions going forward, that there should be a minimum threshold for loading bays, whether it's for a plumber going to the building or someone dropping off online shopping.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that. Keen to join double thinking. Thanks very much for your answers.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we now go to David Hilditch, please. I think that's the final question.
Thanks, Chair, and you're very welcome this morning, folks. Thank you for your presentation. Obviously, a lot of talk about the shortage of labour, and I note that there was at one point within the UK 100,000 people short. Throughout the United Kingdom, that's dropped now to around 75 or so, and so hopefully going to continue. How many? Is it possible to put a figure on what that would be for Northern Ireland only?
Approximately, the figures we don't have exact, but it's around between 1,500 and 2,000 drivers we estimate for here, yeah. So it's quite significant.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned about how you're trying to make it more attractive and that for people coming into the industry and whatnot. It was noted amongst existing drivers that facilities were a big issue, and I haven't really heard that mentioned today. And I know the Chair mentioned, from a gender point of view, female drivers and whatnot. So
yeah. No, facilities, yeah, I mean, I suppose if you take Northern as an example, probably Apple Green, those facilities are much better. But if you touch on female drivers, female driver population is increasing. But if we look at toilet facilities and having to stop on laybys, it isn't there. And there's a risk as well. If our drivers are moving high value products, whatever that may be, then there is a risk. So we always try to tell our drivers to go into safe areas. That safe area on the mainland costs money, sometimes in excess of £25–30 to park that up. But yeah, particularly in Northern Ireland, the facilities, particularly in harbours and areas that we are continuously going into, they're just not there. So it's important, you're right, that will put drivers off, because it is key that they can go somewhere safely, able to use facilities, particularly if they're away for over one night, they need a shower. And also then being able to eat and feel like they're away and being rewarded because they are away from home.
Yes, dignity, privacy, it's all very important, and if drivers are on the road, they need that. Even during COVID, we got notes, and it was just the position that sites were in that drivers weren't allowed on the site. Drivers, essential services, they didn't have a facility. Which was very difficult, where our drivers, they've nowhere to go. And it just wasn't fair. We have a bigger facility now, thankfully, in Carn Industrial Estate, and we made sure when we built that facility, because we're in the industry, we appreciated that, to have a facility for other drivers or subcontractors coming in. We put a simple tea and coffee machine in for free. You can have your tea and coffee. It's so simple, but so appreciated. So we do need to look at what added benefits can we give to drivers, what facilities can be there. I was down in Republic of Ireland, last week, and going into the different services that are in there, and that development hasn't really been created. I'm not completely familiar with what facilities are in mainland GB or on ships, because we don't do that work, but even facilities in the north, we need to improve it. And I suppose, that's where our companies and industry and local producers, they're constantly developing, they're at smaller margins, but yeah, certainly, we as a company have tried to improve facilities for our drivers, because we were very mindful of it, and other drivers, because we wanted to feel like they were welcomed. It was very, very difficult during COVID for drivers, where they couldn't go in anywhere, and no one no one speaking to them, and having plastic. We all had it when we went into the shops, but these are people that were on the daily run. They were lone workers throughout COVID, and I would like to see that improve, and we did our best as a company to do that.
Okay, just moving track a wee bit there, just over to protocol. Certainly, a number of customers have spoken to me, and they're adamant that if and when the grace periods go, they're at serious risk of not being able to continue in business. The cost and delay of getting goods, and especially food items, will mean their business is not viable, and grace periods are the only thing currently giving them that sort of cushion at the minute, and they will find themselves in trouble when these grace periods go. What's your thoughts on that?
I suppose if I come in first, and probably Nick would be well placed to talk about with his East-West. The UK and the EU negotiating teams have both been in Northern Ireland in recent times, Myself and some other industry reps have met with both parties, and they've interacted with businesses. Now, they know what mitigations need to put in place. We know we've outlined that the grace periods is what's holding things, keeping supply chains moving. One example being parcels. So there's no customs required on business to consumer parcels. So you go online today and you buy a tie of a shop in London, there's no customs to doing that. It's the same as before. And that's simply because of that waiver in the place. What we need to do, and the EU have been very receptive to that, they know that. We've outlined, I've sat parcel operators in front of them, we've showed there is no risk to the single market. If a parcel gets on an aircraft to Aldergrove from Birmingham, East Midlands, that parcel's been delivered in Northern Ireland. It's not going to Donegal, it's not going to Dundalk. What we need to do is show that we can differentiate between a business-to-consumer parcel to a business-to-business parcel, because B2B will still need customs of some, if it's over the value of £135. The thing is, there's things like Trusted Trader Scheme as well. We'll hear the EU mention the green lane status. We need that broadened out. We need a Trusted Trader Scheme where basically businesses that are registered under the UK Trader Scheme at the moment that are availing of the SPS waivers, we need that widened out so that everyone can have simplified ways of moving goods here. So we would like to say that the basis is that all freight going to Northern Ireland is deemed not at risk of going to the single market, and that at risk is the exception. And we believe we've made a good case to the EU in this. We've said, listen, if they want this to work, they need to come closer to the EU asks and just hit that negotiated outcome. But I'll pass to Nick of his experience.
Yeah, I mean, the grace periods have certainly helped, and we're doing what we have to do to bring product into Northern Ireland. And for us as a business, you know, we've come up with a solution that they can probably, you know, de-risk the problem. And I think we always talked about what is the risk. I mean, this has been going on now for a year plus, and everything's working. Products are coming in. Okay, there's delays. It's a lot less than what it would. So we don't understand what the risk is, because we're moving products in. We move fresh foods in. We can't see the risk. We don't understand it. And even we've developed a solution that will trace that product from start to finish. So for us, it's about saying, here is a solution. There is no risk. Can we put this to bed? And in terms of grace periods, you know, at the moment we've enough on our plate, so an extension in grace periods or a grace period or a final decision on what need to do, you know, it has to be the answer.
Yeah, well, I just add there, I would like to think, you know, as time has gone on, that there is a technical solution there, even if there was maybe spot checks, or, you know, there has to be a level of trust there with goods moving from the UK to Northern Ireland. And I'm sure the Department of Agriculture has their own issues, you know, with the checks that have to be done and all the pressures that they're under. But, you know, the industry...
There was a level of that going on anyway through agriculture before Brexit.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but I suppose it's just it's fourfold, you know, with the level coming in here. But, you know, if there's a technological solution, and, you know, and if hauliers and the industry come together with departments, that the solution can be found just to make it a bit more seamless and to make sure that the supply chains are kept intact.
Okay, and maybe Seamus, just come back to yourself then in relation to the customs declaration. And I've been asked a question in regards to the fact that declarations are only required on parcels over £135. If that is the case, then a customer wants to know why I'm completing customs declarations and uploading commercial invoices for every package that is shipped from last January through at lesser value to that. And is there any...
Yeah, on the B2B customers, yeah, there's supplementary declarations. So you put through your simplified declaration through like Trader Support Service initially, and then you have to come back and give the supplementary declaration. There's a real problem. I've raised this with HMRC when I met them last week, is that there's no reimbursement scheme in place yet. So let's say I ship something in and I have to pay duty on that. You're meant to be able then to get that, because that money goes to UK Treasury, it doesn't go to anywhere else. There's meant to be a mechanism in place where you get that money back almost immediately. It's not in place yet, and it's because there's a little bit of confusion between UK and EU. Would that be classed as state aid? Now, the legal advice from industry is that it isn't, but HMRC are worried about, in substance, giving people back this money, and then under our court orders being told, right, you have to go and claw that money back again. So that's a real pain for a lot of people. And I know there's some businesses have been really stung in this. They're paying out hundreds of thousands of pounds and they're waiting for that money to come back to them.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well that is all of our questions this morning. We thank you very much for your time. Obviously there's a plethora of issues that we probably still could go into, but time has beat us, and we know the significant issues facing the industry at the minute. So could we ask you please to pass on to your industry our sincere thanks for everything that they're doing in a very difficult time.
George is
George has indicated. George, you're a latecomer. Go on ahead.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Just to thank the Kansas team. One question, not be very long with it. The long journey haulage drivers, is it still norm that they have to have another driver with them? You know, particularly if they need sleep and so forth on the long journey that they have. And I'm sure that if that's the case, that still adds to your costs.
Yeah,
That's the only thing, you know.
Yeah, I suppose COVID had an impact on that. So if you look at some of our trucks, there would be two beds in them. So there would be plenty of occasion when travelling to Europe. We would double man, probably not the right term, double driver a truck, but COVID has limited that now. And I suppose just to touch on, this week we sent the driver to Ukraine, and he's going out on his own. So he will drive legally and within driver's hours. And the journey time is probably around 4 days. So we now probably single man trucks now, but there is an option to double man when we can. And again, that is, as you're right, that is additional cost.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my question. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you, George. Just in closing, thank you all very much for coming. And again, our sincere thanks from the Northern Ireland public, and indeed from this committee, to the efforts that you've went to try and supply support to the Ukrainian people. We understand that in everything that's going on, the haulage sector has stepped up to the plate to help communities in their charitable need, and I have to put that on record. It is very much appreciated. So thank you all very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we have another briefing session, but before we go there, obviously there's a couple of action points there, and we will probably follow up maybe more extensively on this next week, because I know we're tight for time. But obviously the key aspect coming from the presentation was the diesel rebate debate. Now, I think members are of the similar opinion to what has been presented to us. So if members were in agreement, what I would be proposing from the committee is that we would write to the appropriate officials, which I'm told from the clerk is Lucy Fraser, QC MP, Financial Secretary to the Treasury, responsible for HMRC, who would also report to Richie Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And the suggestion is that we write to the one and copy the other in, and also copy in Logistics UK and other supporting industries that have made this call. I think it's very, very clear that to introduce or to remove the rebate on red diesel at a time such as this is madness in the extreme, and I would be proposing that the committee put on record in the strongest possible terms via the correspondence that we do not think that this is an appropriate action at this particular time. So, Cathal, do you have a comment on that?
Chair, I would agree with that, but I would ask the committee to support the cut on fuel duty as well, if possible.
Yeah,
they've raised that issue as well.
I'm happy to include that in the correspondence as well, if members are. Okay, members, so that's an agreed action point.
Have we got a fifth member on?
We do, we have three members online and 3 in here. The other part was that, and obviously we will have a legacy report, and we'll talk more about that later on today, or maybe into the next committee. But it would be a suggestion that we put in that legacy report that the committee consider a bill early in the new mandate to extend HGV driver testing to hauliers. That was another issue, and I think that's certainly something that we could give more explanation to. Members would be content with that point?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So that was the 2 main factors that I seen coming out for that, members, and that's been noted and written down. If we have any other issues that are coming through, we can do so at another time, but I'm keen to get into the next presentation.
So just before you go on, is it right to the Chief Secretary, or right to the Financial Secretary of the Treasury, and copy the Chancellor?
Yes, yeah. And I think also what we could do is we could inform other committees of that action point as well, so we could CC them in, because obviously a lot of the issues that's being talked about reference into economy,
Yeah, absolutely.
reference into obviously the agriculture. Is a collective approach, but this committee is very firmly putting on the record that it calls for the suspension of that proposed end of the rebate. Okay. So members, I think what we will do is we will go now straight again to the briefing from Hydrogen and I if we have them. And again, members, please try and be as brief and succinct as possible because we have business to get through. I think they're all attending online, is my understanding. Yeah, I'm seeing their faces
online,
pop
yeah.
up now.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, so can I welcome for a briefing session now from Hydrogen NI, the potential clean hydrogen offers to Northern Ireland's economy and decarbonisation goals. Members will see the clerk's memo at page 191 and indeed the briefing paper from Hydrogen NI at 194. So can I welcome attending via Starleaf, and I'm just checking that everybody is with us. It's Mr David Surplus, Director of B9 Energy Storage, Mr David Palmer, Partner at Soothsmiths, Mr Gary Borland, Director KPMG, Mr Les Ross, Director Les Ross Planning. Gentlemen, you're all very welcome to committee this morning. Obviously we've been hearing just before you've come to the committee about the significant challenges facing the haulage industry, particularly around fuel sources at present, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say, followed by questions.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Les Ross here. Firstly, I have to apologise for Mr Palmer. He's not able to attend at the last minute today, and he was going to read out the briefing. So I'm going to step into the breach. I'm a poor substitute, but I'll, if you'll indulge me, Chairman. So firstly, I'd like to thank you and the committee for the opportunity to provide this briefing, and we'll be happy to discuss your questions. We consider this briefing particularly timely now that we have an operational energy strategy and the forthcoming climate change legislation with legally binding targets. Hydrogen NI is a not-for-profit membership group established in May 2021 to support the growth of the clean hydrogen economy in Northern Ireland and to provide a voice to industry and organisations with a strong interest in developing a cleaner, greener future through hydrogen. Our current membership includes organisations with expertise in energy generation, manufacturing, energy storage, legal and advisory services, gas networks, planning and public engagement. So we welcome the opportunity to engage with the committee and to assist further in the development of hydrogen policy options so that Northern Ireland can realise the significant economic, environmental and social benefits of clean hydrogen. So hydrogen can be produced through electrolysis, whereby electricity is used to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. Gas from this process is often referred to as green hydrogen or zero carbon hydrogen, as the electricity comes from renewable sources, particularly from wind power. As a result of our geography, our infrastructure and our expertise, Northern Ireland is ideally suited to develop a thriving clean hydrogen economy and to secure a competitive advantage. We benefit from extensive wind energy resources, a hydrogen-ready modern gas network, and the storage facilities, which are the salt caverns at Island McGee. Currently, Northern Ireland's wind energy sector suffers from high levels of curtailment and constraint at around 14.8%. This means that the grid cannot facilitate the available wind energy and the turbines have to be switched off. So hydrogen would address these curtailment issues as it provides dispatchable electricity to counterbalance the non-dispatchable intermittent renewable sources like wind. Globally, policy and economic forces have converged to create a strong momentum in the hydrogen sector, with considerable sums of green capital available for investment in hydrogen technologies. The renewed attention on hydrogen is largely due to a realisation that in many sectors electrification is not or simply too costly, and hydrogen provides an essential component in meeting ambitious net zero targets. In our neighbouring jurisdictions, GB has published a bespoke hydrogen strategy and Scotland a draft hydrogen action plan, both with targets of 5 gigawatts hydrogen production capacity by 2030. We think it's vital that Northern Ireland does not fall behind and end up as a net importer of hydrogen. So it's incumbent on us to forge ahead with a suitable hydrogen policy which allows us to extract the full benefit from our homegrown renewable energy sources and drive down costs and end our reliance on volatile and expensive fossil fuels. GB has adopted a twin-track approach, producing both green and blue hydrogen, but green hydrogen is the best option for Northern Ireland, as we don't have an indigenous gas supply and we don't have carbon storage sites that are required for blue hydrogen production. At present, there are several successful projects and initiatives underway in Northern Ireland, which members of the panel here today are working on, and we're enthusiastic to discuss those with you. It must be noted that the scope and scale of the work being undertaken in GB is more extensive, and that's in large part due to a more conducive and supportive policy and regulation framework. Potential for blending hydrogen with the natural gas in the existing gas network is currently being trialled in the UK, but not in Northern Ireland. For example, the High Deploy demonstration project at Kiel has been permitted as a special exemption by the Health and Safety Executive. But such projects, they're not just able to explore pathways to commercialisation of hydrogen, but this similar in terms of the community trials and the networks here would confirm proof of the viability of green hydrogen and NI, and certainly help with public buy-in, which is a crucial enabler of the hydrogen story. The innovative oxygen and hydrogen demonstrator project at NI Water is the first to deploy a 1 megawatt electrolyser at the Belfast on Crew Street, the wastewater treatment works there, and it shows how the full potential, the full benefits of hydrogen production can be realised. The significant volumes of oxygen produced will alleviate constraint in the sewage network, allowing for increased wastewater processing capacity and avoiding the need for costly upgrades on the part of DFI, enabling housing developments in towns and cities that have been stalled due to sewage constraint issues. There are 30 further sites which are sufficiently constrained and large enough to require an electrolyser. Ultimately, 50 megawatts of proposed hydrogen production in the Northern Ireland plants would provide a significant proportion of the energy required for public transport as well. And we've already seen steps in this direction with TransLink. In the longer term, hydrogen would be a key means by which to decarbonise the heavy transportation sector upon which Northern Ireland's export industry is reliant. But the initial public transport piece would allow some security of demand, which would create an incentive for the industry to build out a region-wide refuelling infrastructure network. In turn, this would enable development of a supply chain, greater economies of scale, and ultimately lower prices. To attract the significant sums of private investment required to accelerate the growth of the green hydrogen economy, investors will need confidence that they can effectively mitigate risk, and there's much that can be done in this respect when it comes to policy, legislation and regulation. Regulation and legislation need to be drafted and updated to facilitate all elements of a hydrogen economy from production to end use. The energy strategy has called for a 56% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. The scale of that challenge and the framework in which to deliver it should not be underestimated, yet the strategy does not plan for a review of the existing legislation until 2025. The Gas Northern Order 1986 must be a priority, and the utility regulators remit extended to include a duty, not just for affordability, but for decarbonisation. This will ensure better alignment with the green growth and energy strategies and the concept of a just transition, which will be an integral part of our future climate change legislation. Another key factor for investors is certainty of demand. Northern Ireland does not have industrial clusters like GB, so to ensure offtake of hydrogen, the most viable option at present is to permit hydrogen blend in the gas networks. For the gas network operators, the ability to blend at a transmission level would de-risk offtake in the medium term and ensure a suitably large demand sink is in place. The committee will not be heartened to learn that at present one of the greatest challenges is Northern Ireland's dysfunctional planning system. To facilitate a hydrogen economy, every aspect of hydrogen from production and storage to transport and distribution will require planning permission, and strongly promotive policy context is required, along with a willingness to expedite these applications, and that needs to be the norm. The inconsistency in council decision making, the delays in statutory consultee response time, the lack of resources, both in terms of staff and funds, and the persistent inefficiencies make for a perfect storm. There is much uncertainty in the planning system, which discourages green capital investment in Northern Ireland. The kind of public opposition which has plagued wind farms is unlikely to be an issue for hydrogen projects. Hydrogen production is containerised, ring-fenced, and most equipment is unseen, and there are no significant emissions. There are certainly issues pertaining to health and safety, as with any gas, but hydrogen poses no more of a risk than the methane that's currently in our networks. It must be said, however, that green hydrogen production at scale relies on further build-out wind energy. So hand in hand with the policy encouragement for clean hydrogen must be a willingness to provide the much needed support for more onshore wind build-out. Current events throw increasingly stark relief that an indigenous clean energy supply is necessary to protect consumers and the most vulnerable here in Northern Ireland. We believe that hydrogen offers a viable energy solution, and it will be a central part of any decarbonisation plan. We look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Les. And again, members have a copy of the presentation from it. So obviously, I suppose many of the issues that relate more, that in relation to hydrogen relate more to the Department for the Economy, but albeit there is significant overlap in certain key areas, such as the impact on transport, which would certainly fall under the remit of this committee. I suppose probably we've been very excited by the prospect of hydrogen. There's certainly been a lot of noise surrounding it, and again, also Northern Ireland's huge potential, particularly in green hydrogen. So I suppose, and I would say to members, we're trying to focus our questions purely on the impact here on infrastructure. So I suppose, looking at the paper, and it refers to creating an incentive for industry to build the region-wide refuelling infrastructure required. So if as well, so this way may be the case. So for example, the the heavy transport sector, including buses, trains, lorries, the move from diesel to hydrogen, which we are hearing is going to be even more sought after if proposed changes were to go ahead. So is there a potential to meet the need in its entirety from green hydrogen produced in Northern Ireland? Anybody want to answer that?
Well, it's David Surplus here. I think the simple answer is yes, and much more besides. There is the ability to completely decarbonise Northern Ireland using a basket of technologies, but one of which is hydrogen. The slight difficulty with the mobility sector is that you produce the hydrogen using an electrolyzer machine, but then you either have to compress the gas or liquefy the gas in order to deliver it into the mobility sector, and that adds cost. It more or less doubles the cost of production when you want to deliver the fuel to vehicles. So as far as displacing carbon emissions are concerned, it's probably cheaper to displace heating in houses by putting the gas into the gas networks because they don't need any compression. So it's much cheaper to deliver to customers and end users through the gas network than through the refueling infrastructures. But having said that, of course, vehicle owners and drivers are already used with paying 4 or 5 times more for energy when they're using their vehicles than when they're sitting at home watching television. So it's all relative, although that has to be said, is mostly made up from government taxation on the vehicle fuels. So if we are to get parity with fossil fuels, then it would have to be a significant contribution from government in reducing the tax burden on the price point.
Okay.
But in terms of actual quantities, there's no shortage of capability of being able to displace all of the fossil fuel-based transport fuels in Northern Ireland.
Okay, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I suppose if I answer with ifs, it's because I suppose I'm looking towards the future. So you're saying that the supply would be there, the capacity certainly there. If the government support was in place in the way in which you would envisage it to be so, how long would you expect it to take in relation to being able to roll out to Northern Ireland to be able to cater for the haulage sector?
Well, the production of the gas is effectively able to happen today. Electrolyzers are being deployed as we speak, and the technology for compressing, storing and dispensing into vehicles is alive and well. There's some examples of that have already been installed in Northern Ireland as well. The difficulty comes on what we call the volume risk, where it's okay for us to produce this gas and it's okay for us to have a certain price point per kilogram, but if you establish a refueling facility, there may be no vehicles coming along, and that means that you're not going to shift the volume that you need. So that then comes down to the transport sector itself, the vehicle operators, the fleet operators. They need to convert their existing vehicles to run on dual fuel, diesel and hydrogen in some sort of blend, or if the vehicles are at their end of their natural life cycle, is to replace them with more modern ones that have hydrogen fuel cells on board. So either way you look at it, there is this gestation of conversion of vehicles, replacement of vehicles, that does take that sort of 15-year period in order to achieve that. And that's assuming that we always have a supply-led situation where we're always a step ahead with the refueling infrastructure, so that the vehicle operators never feel that they need to slow down because there isn't sufficient fuel supplies. But it's 10 to 15 years probably before we could be making significant dents in the displacement of fossil fuels from the transport sector.
Okay. And secondly and finally from me, Hydrogen NI state that the planning system presents, and this is something that's of concern to this committee because it's on record as saying the dysfunctionality in our planning system certainly is having a greater impact on the Northern Ireland-wide economy, but in particular to renewables. So Hydrogen NI state that the planning system presents the greatest single challenge to the development of the hydrogen economy. Could you maybe elaborate, or could somebody elaborate on that for the committee's benefit going forward?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Les Ross here. Basically every element of the of what it takes to create the hydrogen to then get it out and used in the system, you need planning permission for all these bits of infrastructure. And at present, we don't have any planning policy whatsoever to cover that, not specifically. So as an investor looking in, you say, what are the risks here? And the risk is that there's no policy. And we know from other technologies that have deployed here recently, and I'm thinking mainly of the battery technology, that there were a lot of problems arose because the policy wasn't there, and the policy changed mid-term while the developments were being put on the ground. So we can't afford to do that with hydrogen. So we need policies in place immediately, and they should be strongly promotive, we feel, and there should be significant weight attached to the benefits of clean hydrogen for the whole economy. And what we want, really, Chairman, is that DFI officials engage directly with the industry to understand, firstly, the importance of the future energy of hydrogen to the future energy economy, and to understand exactly what the components are of hydrogen infrastructure, so that they can put together guidance for local planners and high-level policies as well to facilitate the industry coming forward. On a wider point, we're all aware of the fact that the planning system is not working properly across the board, and that issue just needs to be sorted out at a wider sense, but it doesn't give any confidence to the hydrogen sector to come forward and develop. And it's a footless industry. It can happen somewhere else, either on this island or in GB, and we will end up as a net importer when we have the perfect set of circumstances here to actually create green hydrogen in Northern Ireland and potentially use it here, but even export it as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going now to members. So Liz Kimmins first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to you all for the briefing this morning. I just have a couple of short questions. I suppose it's in relation to the pilot by NI Water of electrolysis at the wastewater treatment works to try and create more capacity in the system, but to develop hydrogen. So it was just to see, have you had any engagement with NI Water in relation to the pilot? As well as some of the other groups. Last week we had Drains for Development who are calling for wastewater capacity constraints to be addressed.
Yes, our company is B9 Energy from Larne, was one of the 3 companies that entered into the strategic partnership agreement with NI Water, which was part of a public procurement process. It's Lagan Miaika is the EPC contractor. B9 is the developer of the projects and provider of the hydrogen and oxygen ecosystem, which we call the balance of plant. And a company from England called CPH2 is the provider of the electrolyser. B9 actually bought the first one from Doncaster and brought it over to Kinnegor to run the oxygenation trials. And what we did was to produce enough oxygen to run a test batch reactor, which is the secondary treatment. It's got aerobic bacteria inside it that the bacteria consume the organic material at a rate which is determined by the fact that air has 21% oxygen in it. If you add more oxygen to the air that they're getting, then they become metabolically more active, they deal with more waste, and so it speeds up the process. And what we found through the trials, which ended in June last year, was that of the constrained capacity of the plant, we created a 25% headroom in the capacity. So we've actually enlarged virtually the wastewater treatment plant. So now, in theory, you can put more sewage through the existing asset. And on the strength of the results from that study, there was then another procurement process that NI Water ran using money that they sourced from DFE to build a 1 megawatt demonstrator electrolyser and the balance of plant that goes with it. So that 1 megawatt unit fits into a 40-foot container. It's actually built now in Doncaster, and it's going through its factory acceptance tests. So they're producing hydrogen and oxygen now over in England, and they're putting it through some emergency shutdown tests and all those sorts of things. And in the next few weeks, it'll be brought over to Duncrew Street and plugged in, and then they would be able to do the site acceptance testing. and then start to put it into use at the works there. Now, if we were to completely oxygenate the big, massive Duncrew Street wastewater treatment plant, which serves most of Belfast, it's 10 times bigger than the next biggest plant in Northern Ireland, we would need about 20 or 27 megawatts of installed capacity to produce the amount of oxygen. And so that shows how it's really, in most of these projects, they just vent the oxygen. They have no real use for it. But in Belfast, we found a very good use. And that means that we'll be able to sell the oxygen to NI Water. And any money we get for selling the oxygen is money we don't need to burden the price of hydrogen with. So it will bring about cheaper price of hydrogen. And what NI Water initially want to do is to refuel the trucks which bring all the sludge into Duncrew Street for incineration from all of the other wastewater treatment plants across Northern Ireland. One final point on that project, it is pointing towards there being about 30 different sites in Northern Ireland where the wastewater treatment plants are constrained, they're exceeding their discharge limits on occasions, and they are big enough to justify having their own electrolyser plant established with a good enough grid connection and everything. So that would give us 30 projects now to work through, and the agreement is for a 5 to 15-year plan of doing those retrofits. And that would amount to about 50 megawatts installed capacity. Now, if we're going to balance the wind farms, which are being curtailed at 14.8% at the moment, we need about 1,000 megawatts of controllable load. So in order for the wind industry to get back on its feet and have investor confidence so that we can build any more wind farms, be they onshore or offshore, we've got to install about 1,000 megawatts of these machines. And the 50 megawatts from NI Water is a really good start. The economics are better because you can use the oxygen. The planning process that Les was referring to is easier at the wastewater treatment plant because there's certain development rights, and so you're not in a greenfield situation. So it's a really good thing for getting us going. And by deploying that number of electrolyzers, we can begin to see the electrolyzer prices coming down because all of their R&D costs have been absorbed and the economies of scale begin to kick in. And we're hoping to open an assembly plant for the CPH2 machine in Northern Ireland that would make the machines here. That would produce about 2 gigawatts per annum, employ 1,000 people. And it was the single piece of the whole jigsaw that Diane Dodds was very pleased to hear about at the time and gave the project very big political support.
Well, Liz, there's a crash course in electrolysation for you. I hope you took that all in.
Yeah, no, I mean that's really, really interesting, David, and I think it's very positive, I suppose, because we're, as I said, we had Drains for Development in last week, and one of the biggest issues we're faced with is the wastewater capacity issue. I suppose just coming out of your response there, David, in terms of the electricity used for electrolysis, how can we ensure that it's generated from renewable energy rather than gas-powered turbines?
By being very frugal with when we use it. And the working assumption is that what's called the duty factor, how often is it on compared with how often is it off, is about 40%. So it'll be energized in making hydrogen about 40% of the hours in the year. And then 60% it'll be switched off. And in that way, we'll only be running it mostly at night time when it's windy. And then during the day off solar farms would be nearby and they just connect to the electrolyzer and not to the grid. So, and one way of being particular about this is if the system operator who has that job of keeping the balance between generation and load correct at all times, he's the one that whenever there's too much wind, he has to switch off the wind farms. Well, what we're saying is instead of switching off the wind farms, would you not switch on these electrolyzers instead? I mean, the net effect is the same. He achieves a balance on the network. but the wind turbines continue to run. And in a small element of time, you can say that the wind turbines are only running because our machines are on load. So if you switched our machines off, you would then actually have to switch the turbines off as well. So in that respect, the argument is that we are taking 100% green energy off the grid at that moment in time. And it's, the control of the machine is done by the system operator at arm's length to us. And that whole argument we've been making with the Department of Transport in London for 3 years now, so that they would make grid-sourced electricity eligible for a renewable certificate of origin that then could trigger your payments under the Renewable Transport Fuel Obligation Scheme. So, and that's all beginning now to happen, and we're happy enough with the progress on that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, David. Just one final question, Chair, because it was something I was thinking about just as he was talking as well. And you mentioned in your note around the 50 megawatt of proposed hydrogen production at the NI water plants. And how that could maybe provide a significant amount of energy for public transport. Obviously, we've had the hydrogen buses and things like that recently in the north here. So it's just to kind of get a sense of what proportion you consider to be significant. Is this in consideration with the fact that public transport will likely use a combination of both hydrogen and electric technology?
Yes, the shorter distance, slower buses would be electrics, and it's more the longer distance ones like the gold liners that would be hydrogen. So a combination of the two is their decarbonisation strategy. A 1 megawatt electrolyser running on a 40% duty factor would produce 250 kilograms of hydrogen on average in a day. That would be enough for 10 of those buses. So you can sort of see that they've got hundreds of buses, so we need, hundreds of megawatts. I mean, but it's the scale of it is a good match, actually. When we get to wanting the 1,000 megawatts, that's then far too much hydrogen for the mobility sector. It's not growing fast enough to take all that hydrogen, and therefore we have to put it into the gas pipes. So putting it into the transmission pipes for further distribution through Phoenix, Firmus and SGN is where the bulk of the hydrogen will actually go to. And it's lower cost hydrogen because we don't need to compress it for the vehicle use.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, David. Very helpful. Thanks, Drew.
Okay, we now go to Cathal Boylan, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. Just the paper states that hydrogen would address the issue of curtailment. So it was said in the past that the north-south interconnector would address those issues in terms of curtailment. How would hydrogen's use of curtailment impact on the need for infrastructure?
Yes, I don't know, Gary, do you want to say something on that one?
Good morning, members, and thank you for your time today. Gary Boland from KPMG. I think the issue at stake here really is around there's current curtailment based on the current power load and the amount of renewables currently on the grid. There's also the energy strategy and the expectation that we will need to develop a much broader and a much larger renewable sector. Therefore, the broader renewable sector will lead to higher levels of curtailment. What we're suggesting here with hydrogen NI is to use as much of that curtailed wind as possible, as much of that curtailed energy as possible, as efficiently as possible, to give Northern Ireland its indigenous energy security. I think there will likely be, because of the wider market in terms of the Irish market, and in terms of the north-south interconnector, I don't think anyone's saying that the connector is not still required, and it will continue to be required. But as demand grows, so electrical demand generally is expected to grow across the island as we move towards electrification of cars, potential for heat pump requirements. So the overall electric load is still going to be increasing. In the Republic of Ireland as well, you've got the added input from a number of data centres coming on stream. So the requirement for electricity is only going one way. The ability for NI to use as much of its curtailed wind as possible, first of all, I think without it being exported through the interconnector, allows that point around energy security. It also allows you to advance the decarbonisation of agenda more broadly, which for us as a province cuts across multiple sectors. It's not about decarbonisation of transport per se or the decarbonisation of heat per se. It's the impact that that can have in the construction sector, the haulage sector, manufacturing, agri-food. All of those sectors have a requirement for heat and transport. All of those sectors will, in due course, have their own agenda for decarbonisation. So I think it's a broader question around what we want to do as a province in line with our own decarbonisation agenda, our own decarbonisation targets. David, do you want to come in on the back of that?
Not a lot to add, really. I think, for 9 years, our company's been trying to establish what basket of technologies would be required to provide the balancing load to enable offshore wind to be built at 2 or 3 or 4 gigawatts, for example. And when you look at all of the different technology options and the resources that we have here, in terms of pumped hydro potential and such things, then hydrogen, time and again, becomes the only real option. And I suppose the other thing which we really do need is the very large-scale storage. If we're going to set a price, a benchmark price for the hydrogen that would be stable over years and even decades, then is all determined by the volume and pressure range of storage. And it has to be said that the particular circumstances at Ballylumford, where you have the interconnection with Scotland, both for the gas pipe and the Moyle interconnector, large-scale power generation already, very big 275 kV connections, good access for marine vehicles to come ashore from future offshore wind farms, and the location of the Island McGee Energy Limited Salt Cavern project, which promises 500 million cubic meters of volume with a pressure range, of 100 bar or so, as being an absolutely unique resource that would not only provide the security of supply in a decarbonised world where there's no fossil fuels left to play with at all, and we have to be able to generate electricity when there's no wind and no sun. And so that would be using hydrogen as a fuel in gas turbines, either the existing ones converted or brand new ones there for that purpose. And I'm happy to say that we were recently awarded funding from BEIS in London under the longer duration energy storage scheme to do a front-end engineering design of that whole solution at Ballylumford, and it was the only project in the UK to be funded in that category, and the only one in Northern Ireland as well.
Just two quick questions and maybe quick answers. I have to go now. Just in relation to green hydrogen, do you think green hydrogen should be the focus for the industry? And also touch a wee bit on, you said the LDS, the local development plans are regressive. Would you like to comment on that as well, please?
I'll just do the green bit, if I may. The prospects of blue hydrogen are looking pretty slim now. We don't have anywhere to conveniently put the captured CO2. What we would actually have to do with that CO2, if you split it from natural gas, would be to liquefy it, put it on a ship, bring it over to Scotland or England, vaporize it into a gas again, and compress it out into the North Sea and compress it again into a disused gas reservoir. The oil industry is saying it needs about 150 euros a tonne carbon price in order for that venture to take off. So at €150 a tonne carbon price, green hydrogen would already be cost competitive with natural gas. So, it's I don't think it's a starter. On the technical side, there's still a lot of worries about fugitive methane emissions upstream. And also the last 2 carbon sequestration projects that were tried in the world, North Africa, I think, is where one of them was at least. They had really big problems with injecting the hydrogen into the spaces in a timely enough fashion. And also, as you put the carbon dioxide into the ground, you have to take the produced water out to make room for it. And this is heavily contaminated water with oil and gas residues, and some of it was actually seawater. And to be able to clean that up and discharge it to water courses at the rate required is going to be extremely expensive. So green is going to, in Northern Ireland conditions, going to be cheaper and greener than blue is, as far as we can see at the moment.
And just regarding the LDPs and this phrase that they're regressive, what we mean there, we're actually referring to the wind energy resource, and we're all hoping that there'll be considerable offshore wind energy available, probably beyond 2030. But in the meantime, there's no doubt that we have to build a lot more onshore wind if we're going to meet the targets. So, and generally policy at a high level is fairly supportive of that. It could be more supportive, and hopefully through the review of the SPPS, that greater support will come through. But down at the local level, we have some of the councils who are talking about policies which would see quite small distance separations between where turbines can be located and where there are existing houses, and that would effectively completely kill onshore wind in certain council areas, if not all council areas. So there needs to be a very strong connect between what the regional policies are saying and what's happening at the local level. And these, what we're saying regressive is these separation distances in terms of wind are just much too small.
Thank you. Thanks,
Okay, David Hilditch, please. And I'll ask members please to keep brief because we have more business to do.
Talk so much.
I've given my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very welcome, gentlemen. Just in your touching upon the Island McKee caverns there, I do appreciate the logistics with the Ballylumford situation, but there is great concern in the local area in relation to the further use of caverns in the area, which would affect an area of what is really special interest down there, marine life, and the potential destruction of marine life. How far are you in a serious situation to use those if they ever came about? I know the ministers gave some permissions at this stage, which are being challenged, and I suppose I should declare an interest myself, having donated to that legal fund. But there is concern with the local population down there and people who are experienced in fishing and other industries related to the marine side of things down there, and they have their own sort of experiences and stories to tell of the area, but they just see that as if it's going to benefit somebody in storage of gas or whatever, it will have that detrimental impact of taking the marine life away from that particular area. Have you any information from yourselves about usage of that, or indeed where the situation sits with that project?
Yes, what we did for the Bays application was form a consortium of 4 organisations. My company, B9 Energy, is a developer of the production facility for the hydrogen. So we would install the electrolyser station. Then Mutual Energy, that owns and operates the gas transmission pipe in large areas of Northern Ireland, will be designing and building a 100% hydrogen specification pipeline, which would be about 1 kilometre in length, just to test the the engineering disciplines required for doing that safely and in accordance with all of the international standards, etc. Island McGee Energy Limited is a partner that is, as you say, is already developing the salt cavern storage asset. And, you know, we would be looking to them to take the responsibility for that part of the project. And if the salt caverns materialise, then, you know, what we're doing is showing a need for them. What that need would be strategically important for Northern Ireland. And then the fourth and final partner is Net Zero Technology Centre in Aberdeen, who are a membership group of almost everybody in upstream oil and gas industry. So all of the oil majors are there, and it's a forum whereby they try to do the decarbonising agenda. So they will be supplying us with an open cycle gas turbine generation module, which is being decommissioned off a North Sea oil and gas platform. So it's at the end of its life. And what we'll be doing is recommissioning it, running it on natural gas again, but then quickly going through a series of trials to blend hydrogen in with the natural gas. We know we'll be able to go to 70% hydrogen almost immediately, but the question is how high towards 100% can we get? What modifications do we need to make? And another thing we'll be doing is showing how oxygen, if it's into the air inlets of the gas turbine, will improve the part load efficiency. So that means that the carbon intensity of Northern Ireland's electricity mix could improve by utilising the otherwise vented oxygen. So in answer to your question, George, there, it is ongoing. It will be Island McGee Energy's prerogative to either bring that part of the project to fruition or not. And so really I would direct your questions in their direction.
Yes, but from your own point of view, if it doesn't materialise and it is undeliverable, or indeed it's caught up in a quagmire of legalities over the next few years, can the other aspects go ahead at Ballylongford without the caverns?
Well, elements of it will be able to be done, yes. It would be a partial outcome, if you like. We wouldn't be able to achieve all of the objectives that we originally set down to do. So, you know, it is what it is. So we would have to accept that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We now go to Patrick Delargy for a question.
Hi, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, yes.
Yeah. Thanks for the briefing. Just have a couple of questions really around the planning system to start off with. You noted that it presents the single greatest challenge to the development of the hydrogen economy, and the committee unfortunately is well aware of the myriad of issues that plague the planning system, but can you elaborate on how your sector in particular is impacted by it?
Yes, I don't want to go over what I've said again, but basically it's regarding, number one, the ability to invest in Northern Ireland, or the incentive for companies to come and invest. So if they don't see a clear path through the planning system, they just take their money and elsewhere, and they don't invest here. And so the planning system has to be absolutely clear. It has to be, you have to know that there's a time scale for getting a decision, and that you're not going to be tripped up in some way, you know, at a later date. So what we're really asking for is engagement now to help a policy in place, and for the planners to really understand what's coming down the track, which is definitely a lot of hydrogen development. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, no, that's great, Liz, thanks. Just on a second point then, a note that you've put on that the North's wind energy sector suffers from high levels of curtailment and constraint that's 14.8% at the minute. So it was just for reference what the curtailment level of other regions are.
Well, it's a good question, and what you'll find is that almost nowhere else in the world is subjected to constraint and curtailment in the same proportions that we have. You'll hear curtailment mentioned in Europe quite a bit, but what they actually mean is constraint across boundaries of member states. It's the names aren't quite aligned correctly. But it's because we have a very big, well-supported wind sector in the past, but a very small population, that we end up in situations where there's too much wind. Now, GB doesn't experience it at all, but when they build 100 gigawatts of offshore wind in the North Sea, including the Dogger Bank and Hornsey and all of those big areas, then it will begin to happen there too. And our strategy as far as supply chain solutions in hand with DFE is that now we begin to produce the goods and the services and the skills to be able to solve these problems here in Northern Ireland. Whenever they begin to occur in GB, well, we've all got the answers and the equipment, and we can export our goods and services across there.
Just final point just was around the energy strategy, which has been recently published. What are your thoughts on that in terms of hydrogen?
I think Gary can answer that one.
I was just going to jump in on that one. I think in terms of hydrogen generally, Padraig, in terms of the energy strategy, I think it's clear, and I think this group would agree in terms of hydrogen, and I would agree, that hydrogen is not the answer necessarily today. What I mean by that is that the energy strategy has then got energy action or action plans coming out of that, which are measured annually. Hydrogen doesn't really feature on those plans, for 2022, for instance, and that should be obvious that there are issues here to be addressed before hydrogen can come more clearly and more focused on the agenda. What needs to happen, of course, is we've talked about planning. I'm not going to get into that. It's not my area of expertise. But in terms of, there are other issues there that need to be addressed as well before hydrogen can come into the fore at scale. So we've touched upon things like injection onto the grid, but you'll also have picked up through the briefing note that there are regulatory challenges there. There are government policy issues there that will give that base for investors to come on board and actually deploy money to make this happen. So to answer your question, the energy strategy is probably right to be focused on nearer term wins with hydrogen coming down the track. But I think this group's not expecting hydrogen to be front and centre in 2022. But also the flip side of that is, if we don't start now, we will be left behind. We're already behind the GB market, for instance. So if we want to keep step or become that market leader, we need to start now, because there are long lead-in times here for trials, for health and safety aspects, for planning, for building investor cases, building the construction capability that David has referenced. All of that needs to start sooner rather than later, because in 3, 4, 5 years' time, we're at risk of being too late.
Thanks very much for your answers.
Thank you, and can I thank David, Gary and Les for their presentation this morning and afternoon at the committee. It's much appreciated and certainly will inform our decision making going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, members, so we will go back to the start of the business to make sure that we get through. Okay, members, in relation to apologies, I had none. Agenda item number 1. Agenda item number 2, chairperson's business, I had none. Draft minutes, tabled at page 2, amended draft minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of March 2022. Could advise members that there was an error in the draft minutes in the meeting pack, and an amended copy has been added to the tabled papers. Are members content that the minutes are a true and accurate reflection? Agreed?
Agreed.
Members, agenda item number 4, which is matters arising. Page 14 of your pack, matters arising from the meeting on the 2nd of March 2022. Could I ask members if there are any issues arising from the meeting? Members have none. Agenda item number, at page 16, outstanding committee requests for information. Agenda item number 5, which is correspondence. Can I draw members' attention to page 25, the correspondence memo? Are members content with the actions as suggested in the memo? Agreed? Thank you, members. Agenda item number 6, which is subordinate legislation.
Chair, just on correspondence.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, just at page 98, the issue of the response from the Minister in terms of the reservoir stuff. Need to make sure that the angling societies are not impacted by it. I appreciate the answer, but just to keep that in note and keep we update on that just as it rolls out. Obviously the consultation now has been finished and we got a briefing on it, but it's just to keep the angling societies on board with us and whatever comes out of that, just to keep it on the agenda, you know, on the department. Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, would it be appropriate to add a paragraph to the committee's legacy report to reflect that the committee would like the assessor committee at possible time?
And I note we have had no formal response regarding the wedding car position. I'm right on that from the department yet. So obviously that has to feature heavily, well, not only wedding cars but also for funeral directors as well regarding this committee's position.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we go to agenda item number 6, which is subordinate legislation, SL1s not subject to assembly proceedings. Can I advise members that there are 5 proposals for statutory rules not subject to assembly proceedings at page 120. SL1, the schools part-time 20 mph speed limit amendment order Northern Ireland 2022. SL1, the road races Craiganklet hill climb order Northern Ireland 2022. SL1, the road races Cookstown 100 motorcycle race road race Northern Ireland 2022. SL1, the road races Tannergee 100 order Northern Ireland 2022, and SL1, the road races Circuit of Ireland rally order Northern Ireland 2022. It's not hard to see what time of the year we're in, members. Are members content with the proposals for the statutory rules? Thank you, members. Agenda item number 7, which is SL1, the B3 Main Street Market Hill abandonment order Northern Ireland 2022. Page 134, the SL1. The proposal is subject to negative resolution procedure. The rule will abandon an area of road compromising a portion of footway from its junction with the B78 Moan Road. I have received no information regarding objections to this. Following statutory consultation, there's been no objections to the proposed rule, and I'm certainly aware of none. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Agenda item number 8, which is SL1, the S6 Castle Dawson bypass abandonment and stopping up order Northern Ireland 2022. At page 139, the SL1, the proposal is subject to negative resolution procedure. The rule will abandon 2 lengths of road at Bells Hill Road, Annaghmore, and stop up 3 lengths of Bells Hill Road and 1 length of Annaghmore Road. Annaghmore 2 road traffic on the A6 Castle Dawson bypass between Castle Dawson and Toome. Following statutory consultation, there has been no objections to the proposed rule. Are members content with the proposed rule?
Content.
Thank you, members. We now move to agenda item number 9, which is the SL1, the Railways Safety Management Amendment EU Exit Regulation Northern Ireland 2022. Members will see at page 146, the SL1, the proposal is subject to negative resolution procedure. The rule will streamline the safety certificate process for railway undertaking operating on the Northern Ireland Rail Network. The committee received a briefing by department officials at the 23rd of February 2022 committee meeting, and the committee further deferred its consideration at last week's committee meeting pending information from the department. That has now been received. I suppose it doesn't completely answer the question that I asked in relation to the regulation, so I will be reserving my position on this particular SL1. Roy?
I continue to have concerns about this. Seldom have I seen any statutory rule with so much feedback from authoritative bodies raising concerns. Amongst others, there's TransLink expressing concerns that this is the 5th amendment and will make it difficult to follow. I've paraphrase that correctly. I noticed also it's changing the procedures in Northern Ireland compared to that in Great Britain. And in terms of some of the commentary that the department is making to many of the technical comments that have been made, there are comments such as they will look at potentials of making these changes. I get a sense that this is rushed legislation, and there's a degree of acknowledgement that the department will be coming back to try and correct some of the admissions. I haven't fully understood why it needs to be rushed at this time, and I am concerned with what has been proposed. So I too reserve my decision.
Okay. So before we go forward, are members content? We have reserved positions from Mr. Beggs, from myself, from Mr. Haulage and Mr. Robinson.
Yeah.
So I need to check with the chair as to, or with the clerk as to what.
Chair, if members are content at this stage, the 4 members out of the 6 here have reserved the position. So if the committee is content to say that the committee has reserved its position.
Okay. That's on record.
Yeah.
Okay, members, agenda item number 10, which is SR 2022-66, the Venal Bangor Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2022. Members, we're going to defer this to next week, as the Examiner of Statutory Rules report will be reported on Friday, and therefore it's best placed to come back to the committee next week whenever that's in place. Members content with that procedural point?
Content.
Thank you, members.
Yeah.
Okay, members. So obviously we'll go now to agenda item number 13, which is the Committee for Infrastructure Committee Legacy Report 2017 to 2022. Clerk's memo at page 200. And I'm going to hand over to the clerk to actually talk us through his points as to the content.
Thank you, Chair.
I dropped in at there, Jim. Sorry about that.
Just give me a second, Chair. Yeah, the report is the standard structure for committee legacy reports in the Assembly. It goes through the process of remit and powers of the committee, and then review of the mandate. So it covers the inquiry and various reviews that the committee has undertaken that are of significance, which may follow on for the next committee. And then following that, there is a section at page, scroll down to the page, it's issues for consideration for the incoming committee, which is as, one second, yep, it's at page 236 of members' papers. So if members want to look at that, the areas listed that I suppose in a way many of them would be unfinished business for this committee at the end of the mandate are road maintenance contracts, post-legislative scrutiny of the Motor Vehicle Compulsory Insurance Act, as there was no committee stage of that. The Northern Ireland Audit Office report on planning in Northern Ireland, which the committee wasn't able to consider as it's with ESC. A consultation on biennial MOT testing, which the committee was supportive of. A Northern Ireland Water, and the ongoing concerns, and with TransLink, similarly ongoing concerns with TransLink. A Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Task Force, the impact on the construction sector of water infrastructure under capacity. Then the committee has, it has been suggested adding to that the issues in relation to the wedding and funeral cars, and what was the other?
Reservoirs, stuff, anglers,
reservoirs and anglers, and then I think in relation to the first or 11th session,
that was in relation to the change in driving examiner status for hauliers.
That's right, Chair, and the correspondence to the Financial Secretary, the Treasurer,
and its position on red diesel. So the one thing I would say there is obviously, yes, we need to clarify and have included in this legacy report regarding the review of the Taxi Act, but more importantly, immediate actions that can be taken to help alleviate the problem, such as exemption certificates, etc. Roy, you had something to add?
Yeah, I didn't hear it mentioned there, and I think it is worthy of addition. It's the issue when we were examining unadopted roads, particularly those where there were bonds in place, and there was staff indicating that there had been a significant reduction in those involved in the enforcement side to draw down those bonds to bring roads up to standards. So there's a missing link in getting roads in new developments completed.
Yeah, fair point. Okay. Members are broadly content with that, and as suggested. So I'm imagining then those edits will come, and then this will come back to the committee next week.
Yes, Chair, for final
agreement.
Final meeting.
Okay, members, that's fair enough. Agenda item 14, which is the forward work programme, and I draw members' attention to the proposed draft work programme at page 245. Members are content with the last committee meeting. And item number 15, which is any other business. One item to raise on the back of the haulage sector's presentation that we didn't mention, but they did, and I think it's important. I think Cahill raised it as well. So obviously there's a differential now in other parts of the United Kingdom and maybe even the Republic regarding the driving hours because of COVID. So I think he said 6 hours is the difference. That's putting hauliers in Northern Ireland to their disadvantage. So I would propose, if the committee was in agreement, that we also write to the department to ask why this was not extended to Northern Ireland, and if it can, because my understanding is that still is the position for hauliers within GB and indeed in the Republic. Roy Beggs.
I would support doing so, and my particular reason for doing so is that there is still a significant number of COVID cases in the community, and that will undoubtedly result in a reduction of the already shortage of HGV drivers that exist there. So whilst the peak of COVID, I think we hope has already been passed, there still is an ongoing issue which is affecting the logistics sector and haulage sector.
Okay, Cahill Byrne.
Yeah, Chair, just in writing to the Exchequer, however, writing to the Treasury in relation to the fuel duty and also the red diesel issue, we need to try and couch it in language of the impact on the economy, because, I mean, whilst you heard the hauliers today talk about the hauliers, it impacts right down to the consumer.
Of course.
So we need to try and couch it in that language.
Yeah, which is.
You mean overall? So
yeah,
that's.
So those points have been raised, and certainly it will, and we will put that to other committees as well regarding our position. Okay, members, thank you. We go now to agenda item number 16, which is date, time and location of next meeting. The next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. Wednesday the 16th of March 2022 in room 30 Parliament Buildings. And can I thank members for their attendance this morning and their flexibility in relation to changing the schedule to suit other members. Thank you, members. The meeting is now adjourned.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber programme signed.